The ballroom glittered a sea of diamonds and arrogance, and Mark Stafford was the king of his small, perfect world. His new wife Chloe was a trophy on his arm, and his success felt inevitable. He laughed thinking of the woman he'd left behind, his plain, unambitious ex-wife. He imagined her clipping coupons in a tiny apartment. But then the music stopped. Security, stern and imposing, began clearing a path through the crowd. Mark was annoyed, pushed aside like a nobody, until he saw who they were clearing the way for. The woman who stepped out of the Rolls-Royce wasn't just his ex-wife. She was a queen. The grand charity ball at the New York Public Library was not merely an event. It was a declaration. It was a place where old money reluctantly mingled with new, and where men like Mark Stafford could measure their ascent. Tonight Mark felt he had finally arrived. He adjusted the silk lapels of his Tom Ford tuxedo, a smug smile playing on his lips. Beside him, his wife Chloe was a vision in a shimmering backless Vera Wang gown that had cost more than his first-year salary. Her diamonds, a recent gift from him, caught the light from the massive chandeliers scattering fractured rainbows across her skin. "Darling," Chloe purred, linking her arm through his. "Robert Jennings is waving us over. His firm just landed the new tech IPO. Mark nodded, his gaze sweeping the room. Of course. Let's not keep him waiting. Mark Stafford was a man sculpted by ambition. He was a senior vice president at a mid-tier private equity firm, a position he'd secured not just through his own ruthless networking, but by marrying Chloe. Her father, Michael Reed, was a titan, a man whose name opened doors that Mark had once only peered at through keyholes. Tonight, Mark wasn't just Mark Stafford. He was the son-in-law, the chosen one, the man who had successfully traded up. As they navigated the throng, Mark accepted compliments with practiced ease. "Mark, fantastic quarter," one man boomed. "Chloe, you look divine," another whispered. He loved this. He loved the scent of expensive perfume, the clinking of champagne flutes, the quiet, desperate hum of networking. His new life was perfect. It was solid, expensive, and shiny. It was everything his old life was not. His old life. The thought surfaced like a bad taste. His old life had a name, Sophia. He allowed himself a brief dismissive thought of his ex-wife. Sophia Hayes. Plain, quiet, brilliant in a bookish way, Sophia. The woman who had proofread his MBA thesis. The woman who'd managed their tiny budget so he could afford the right suits for his interviews. The woman who, in the end, just hadn't been enough. He'd told her as much 2 years ago in the beige living room of their rented condo. "I'm moving forward, Soph." He'd said the words clinically cruel. "This. Us. It's just not ambitious enough. I need more. You're comfortable." "Comfortable," she had repeated, her voice hollow. "You're happy with coupons and spreadsheets. I want this." He gestured vaguely at the life he now had. He'd left her, and thanks to a prenup he'd insisted on when his first big bonus hit, she'd been left with very little. He'd heard through the grapevine she was working some low-level data entry job, living in a tiny studio apartment in Queens. The thought provided a satisfying dark punctuation to his own success. He was here. She was there. The natural order of things. "Mark, darling, are you listening?" Chloe's voice snapped him back. "I said Robert is talking about the merger." "Absolutely, darling." He refocused, his corporate smile locking back into place. He was schmoozing with Robert Jennings, laughing at a joke that wasn't funny when the atmosphere in the room suddenly shifted. It wasn't a loud noise, it was a change in pressure. The murmur of conversation near the grand marble entrance quieted. Then a line of men in dark, impeccably tailored suits and clear earpieces moved into the room. They weren't the venue's security. They were private. They moved with a silent, imposing efficiency, creating a wide, clear path from the door toward the main dais. "What on earth?" Chloe murmured, annoyed. "They're blocking the path to the bar." Mark frowned. A few prominent guests, including Chloe's father, were asked to step aside. "Step aside, sir." Ma'am, please clear the walkway. The tone was polite but non-negotiable. Mark felt a flash of indignation. He and Chloe were also waved back by a man with a jawline that looked carved from granite. "Who the hell do they think they are?" Mark muttered, fixing his tie. "Must be a politician." "Ugh, how tedious," Chloe huffed. The room was now split in two by this invisible wall of security. All eyes turned to the entrance. The music, a live string quartet, faltered for a moment. A black Rolls-Royce Cullinan had pulled up outside its engine, a whisper. A driver hastened to open the rear door. The first person to emerge was a man whose presence sucked the air from the room. Mark recognized him instantly. Everyone did. Marcus Harrison, the reclusive, legendary tech billionaire. Harrison hadn't been seen at a public event in 5 years. He was the white whale of investors, a man who built and dismantled entire industries from his private island. A collective gasp went through the gala. Chloe's hand tightened on Mark's arm. "Oh my God," she breathed. "It's him. Father has been trying to get a meeting for a year." Mark's heart hammered. This was an opportunity. If he could just get a word in. Marcus Harrison stood by the open car door, but he didn't move. He turned back, his expression uncharacteristically soft, and offered his hand to the passenger still inside. A black, high heel, simple and lethally elegant, stepped onto the pavement. Then a leg disappearing into the sleek lines of a sapphire blue Armani gown. The dress was not ostentatious. It was structural, powerful, and utterly refined. The woman who emerged was not beautiful in the way Chloe was beautiful. Chloe was a decoration. This woman was a statement. Her dark hair was pulled back in a severe, elegant chignon revealing simple diamond studs. Her makeup was minimal, her posture was perfect, and her gaze was steady. She took Marcus Harrison's hand, and Mark Stafford's champagne flute slipped from his fingers, shattering on the marble floor. The sound was shockingly loud in the sudden silence. But Mark didn't notice. He couldn't breathe. Chloe, oblivious, whispered, "Who is that? Is that his wife? I've never seen her before. She's so plain." Mark's voice was a dry croak. His entire perfect, shiny world had just cracked down the middle. "That," he whispered, his blood turning to ice. "That's Sophia. 2 years ago." The smell of stale coffee and cheap toner. Sophia Hayes stared at the stack of bills on her particle board desk. Past due, final notice. They were all addressed to her. Mark, in his surgical extraction from their marriage, had been meticulous. The car was leased in his name. The condo was in his name. The joint accounts had been systematically drained to pay for shared debts she didn't even know they had, mostly from his new expensive lifestyle. He had left her with her personal savings, $1, $428, and a pile of tax forms from the consulting work she'd done to support him, for which she was now liable. She was 34 years old with a master's degree in financial mathematics, and she was applying for data entry jobs that paid $18 an hour. The breakup itself had been a masterpiece of psychological cruelty. It hadn't been a fight. It had been a performance. Mark had sat her down, not on their worn-out sofa, but on a hard dining chair he'd pulled into the middle of the room as if it were an interrogation. "Soph, I'm going to be direct because I respect you." He'd begun a lie so blatant it stung more than the truth. "This isn't working." She had braced herself. She'd seen it coming. The late nights, the scent of Chloe's Santal 33 perfume on his suits, the way he'd started to look at her not with hatred, but with something worse, pity. "You're not growing," he'd continued pacing. "I'm on a rocket, Sophia. I'm heading for the stratosphere. And you're ballast. You're comfortable." That word again. Comfortable. It was the word he used for her old-fashioned loyalty, for her refusal to play corporate games, for her belief that their partnership was about more than just his career. "I built your career, Mark," she'd said, her voice shaking. "The algorithms you used in your pitch to KKR, those were mine. The financial model that got you your promotion, I wrote it on our honeymoon while you were scuba diving." He had the audacity to look wounded. Don't be petty, Sophia. We were a team, but teams change. The league gets bigger. You don't have the killer instinct. Chloe's father, Mr. Reed, he sees my potential. He wants to nurture it. Chloe sees your potential, you mean? Mark had sighed, a sound of profound disappointment. See, this is what I'm talking about. This smallness. You're thinking about cheating. I'm thinking about legacy. He'd told her he was moving out. He'd told her his lawyer would be in touch. He'd told her not to make it messy. I'm giving you a clean break, Soph, he'd said, standing by the door, already looking like a stranger in his expensive suit. It's a chance for you to, I don't know, find someone on your own level, go back to school, whatever it is you people do. You people. The door had closed. She had not cried. Not then. She sat on the hard chair for 3 hours, the silence of the beige condo pressing in on her. The life she had patiently, lovingly built, the career she had sacrificed for his, had been packed up and taken away like rented furniture. He hadn't just left her. He had erased her. For 6 months, she spiraled. The rejections from investment banks were polite but firm. While your academic background is impressive, Ms. Hayes, a 2-year gap combined with your previous role at, well, nowhere, makes you a difficult fit for our fast-paced environment. She was too old to be an analyst, too inexperienced to be a VP. She was trapped in the professional purgatory he had designed for her. She finally took the data entry job. It was humiliating. The fluorescent lights buzzed. The stale coffee was free. She sat in a cubicle farm inputting numbers, her brilliant mind screaming. One night, sipping cheap vodka from a coffee mug in her tiny queen studio, she'd been scrolling through LinkedIn. She saw Mark's promotion. A picture of him and Chloe beaming at a top 30 under 30 finance event. His post was full of platitudes. Incredibly humbled. Had blessed. Huge thanks to my team and my mentor, Michael Reed. Sophia stared at the screen. The fog of her depression, the gray numbness, suddenly burned away. It was replaced by something white-hot. It wasn't just anger, it was fuel. Ballast, she whispered to the empty room. I'll show you ballast. She turned off the TV. She logged out of LinkedIn. She opened the laptop she'd bought with her first data entry paycheck. She pulled a dusty textbook from a box, Stochastic Processes and Financial Futures. She wasn't going to apply for jobs anymore. She was going to create one. She remembered the algorithm she'd written for Mark, the one he'd claimed as his. It was good, but it was basic. It was a toy. In the 2 years since she'd had ideas, big ideas, ideas about predictive modeling for high-frequency trading, about identifying systemic risk before it cascaded. She worked from 7 p.m. to 3 a.m. every night. Her data entry job paid for her rent and her servers. She ate ramen and drank black coffee. She didn't date. She didn't see friends. She coded. She backtested data. She built a model. After 3 months, it was functional. After 6, it was brilliant. It could analyze global market chatter, regulatory filings, and shadow banking systems to predict with 94% accuracy a market shock event 2 weeks before it happened. She called it Cassandra. She didn't send it to a bank. She didn't put it on her resume. She packaged her findings, a concise 20-page white paper, showing how her model would have predicted the last 3 flash crashes, and she sent it to one person. She sent it to the private encrypted email of Marcus Harrison, the one man in the world who would understand, the one man who saw finance not as a game of golf, but as a war of information. She didn't expect a reply. She went to her cubicle the next day, her eyes burning, and she input her numbers. 2 days later at 11:04 a.m., her burner phone rang. It was an unlisted number. Ms. Hayes? The voice was quiet, raspy, and unmistakable. Marcus Harrison. Your math is elegant. My jet is landing at Teterboro in 90 minutes. Be there. The line clicked dead. Sophia stared at the buzzing fluorescent light above her desk. She logged out of her terminal. She took her cheap coat. She didn't say goodbye to her manager. She walked out of the building and never looked back. The Teterboro tarmac was windswept and gray. A Gulfstream G650 sat waiting, its engines idling with a low, powerful hum. Sophia, clutching her laptop bag, was the only passenger. The flight attendant, who looked more like a senior diplomat, offered her champagne. Sophia asked for water and a legal pad. By the time she landed in the Bahamas, where Harrison kept his private innovation hub, a team was waiting for her. They weren't bankers. They were quants data scientists and 2 former NSA cryptographers. Marcus Harrison met her in a simple glass-walled office overlooking the ocean. He was in a linen shirt and shorts, looking more like a retired beach bum than a man who could buy countries. "Cassandra," he said, tapping her white paper on his desk. "It's predictive, it's clean, but it's reactive. I don't want to predict the crash, Ms. Hayes. I want to be the one who causes it, or the one who prevents it. Can you do that?" Sophia, running on 3 hours of sleep and pure adrenaline, didn't flinch. "Yes, but I need access to real-time global trade clearing data, not the 24-hour delayed feeds. I need the raw feed from SWIFT, DTCC, and the major exchanges." Harrison smiled. It was a cold, appreciative smile. "I have that." For the next 18 months, Sophia was not a person. She was a mind. She was forged. Harrison gave her unlimited resources, a black card budget, and a team of 20 geniuses. He was a brutal, brilliant mentor. He tore apart her assumptions, pushed her to think bigger, and taught her the language of true power. "Loyalty is a currency, Sophia," he told her one night over a game of chess. "Don't spend it on people who are bankrupt." He taught her about leverage, about how the real money wasn't in stocks. It was in debt, in logistics, in the structural weaknesses of over-leveraged companies. She learned. She absorbed. She rebuilt Cassandra from the ground up. It was no longer just a predictive model. It was an X-ray of the global economy. It could see the stress fractures in a company's foundation, the hidden debts, the executive dependencies, the political risks. It was a weapon. 6 months ago, she'd presented her first major finding. "Harrison Global Ventures," she'd said, addressing the board from their London office where she was now based. "We've been focused on acquiring tech. We're wrong. The real opportunity is in logistics and the mid-level private equity that funds it, specifically firms with high exposure to European port regulations." She put a name on the screen. "Reed Capital Partners." "Reed Capital," she explained, "looks robust. It's run by Michael Reed. It's got a solid reputation, but Cassandra shows it's dangerously over-leveraged. 90% of its portfolio is tied up in shipping firms that are reliant on a single trade route, one that is about to be politically destabilized. Furthermore, their entire executive leadership is a nepotism trap." She clicked to the next slide, a picture of Mark Stafford smiling from a finance blog. "This is Mark Stafford, the COO. He's also the founder's son-in-law. His risk management strategies are non-existent. He's been cooking the books, not illegally but unethically shuffling assets to hide the portfolio's core weakness. Reed Capital is a house of cards. When this trade route is renegotiated in 3 months, they won't just stumble. They'll implode." The board was silent. "So we short them?" one VP asked. "No," Sophia said, her voice cutting through the room. "Shorting is messy. It's a gamble. We acquire them. Or more precisely, we acquire their debt. Right now, it's still rated A+. We buy it for pennies on the dollar through shell corporations. When they default, we don't just take their assets. We take the company. We take their board seats. We take everything." Marcus Harrison had watched her, his expression unreadable. When she finished, he simply said, "Execute it." Sophia spent the next 3 months orchestrating the most complex, hostile, and silent acquisition in modern history. She bought Reed Capital's debt from dozens of different holders, masking the purchases so Reed's alarms never went off. 2 weeks ago, the trade deal had collapsed, just as Cassandra predicted. Reed Capital's portfolio went into freefall. The margin calls began. Yesterday, Michael Reed had woken up to discover that his primary creditor, a mysterious holding company based in the Caymans, was calling in his entire $9 billion debt. A debt he couldn't pay. The holding company, in turn, offered a solution, a full acquisition. That holding company was, of course, Harrison Global Ventures. The acquisition was finalized this afternoon. Tonight's gala was coincidentally the perfect place to announce it. The board of the charity was full of Reed's allies. Harrison had insisted Sophia join him. "You built the weapon, Ms. Hayes. You should be there to see it fire." She had hesitated. "I don't know, Marcus. It seems petty," he'd asked. "No, it's closure. You're not going as Mark's ex-wife. You're going as the new CEO of Harrison's European operations. The position is your reward for this." So she had agreed. She'd put on the Armani dress Harrison's personal shopper had sent. She'd looked in the mirror. The woman looking back was not the comfortable Sophia. This was someone new, someone forged, someone who understood ballast. She had realized with a cold, clear certainty that ballast wasn't what held the rocket down. It's what gave it stability before it launched. Mark had just let go too soon. The moment Sophia stepped onto the marble floor of the ballroom, the silence that had fallen stretched, becoming thin and taut. It was a silence born of pure, unadulterated shock. Marcus Harrison, the kingmaker, had arrived, and he had brought with him an unknown queen. Sophia walked with a stillness Mark had never seen. Her steps were unhurried. Her gaze was not darting around nervously, soaking in the glamour. It was directed, focused, and completely, utterly, terrifyingly calm. She was not overwhelmed by the room. The room was overwhelmed by her. Mark stood frozen, the shattered pieces of his champagne flute at his feet. A waiter rushed to clean it up, but Mark didn't notice. "Sophia," he breathed. The name felt alien in his mouth. "Mark, who is she?" Chloe insisted, her voice now sharp with irritation. She pulled on his arm. "You know her? How do you know her? Is she one of your old assistants?" The insult, which would have once amused Mark, now made his stomach clench. Sophia and Marcus Harrison were now moving. The line of security moved with them, a discreet, protective bubble. They were not walking the perimeter schmoozing as Mark had been. They were walking straight to the dais where the event organizers and the mayor of New York were waiting. The mayor, a man Mark had been trying to get a photo with all night, rushed to greet them. He shook Harrison's hand, then turned to Sophia, his expression one of deep respect. "Ms. Hayes," the mayor said, loud enough for those nearby to hear. "A pleasure. Your work on the new Urban Tech Fund is revolutionary." "Mr. Mayor," Sophia's voice replied. It was the same voice, the same soft timbre, but the hesitation was gone. The upward lilt of uncertainty she'd always had was replaced by a flat, declarative confidence. "Thank you for having us. Marcus and I are eager to discuss the next phase." Ms. Hayes. Marcus and I. Mark felt a wave of dizzying vertigo. This was not possible. This was a nightmare. Perhaps he'd had a bad oyster. Chloe, however, had processed the scene and arrived at a different, more cynical conclusion. Her painted lips curled into a sneer. "Oh, I see," she whispered to Mark, her voice dripping with venom. "Your mousy little ex-wife. She cleaned up, got a makeover, and landed Marcus Harrison. My God, she's a gold digger." A gold digger. Mark seized on the explanation. It was the only one that made sense. It was the only one that kept his world intact. Of course. Sophia, bitter and abandoned, had used her looks, what little she had, and played the damsel in distress, snaring the biggest whale of all. She wasn't powerful. She was a parasite, just on a grander scale. The relief was so profound he almost laughed. "That's it," he murmured. "She's with him. That's all this is." "Pathetic," Chloe scoffed. "And he's so old, still a billionaire. I suppose even a 4 can become a 10 with that kind of money. Well, don't you dare speak to her. It's humiliating." But Mark couldn't look away. He was obsessed. He needed to see her. He needed to confirm his new theory. He needed to see her fawn over Harrison to see the obsequious dependent woman he'd left. He watched her as she stood on the dais. She was talking to a senator and the CEO of J.P. Morgan. She wasn't fawning. She was briefing them. The men were leaning in, listening. Harrison was standing beside her, not as her protector, but as her partner. He nodded at something she said, a look of genuine approval on his face. The world tilted again. I need a drink, Mark muttered. He broke away from Chloe, moving toward the bar, his path intentionally taking him near the dais. He needed to get closer. He had to hear. As he approached a security guard, the same one with the granite jaw put a polite, firm hand on his chest. "I'm sorry, sir. This area is reserved." "I'm Mark Stafford," he said, his voice tight. "I'm with Michael Reed. The guard's expression didn't change. "This area is reserved, Mr. Stafford." Mark was a guest. He was a VP, and he was being blocked. He looked past the guard. Sophia was just 20 feet away. She turned her head slightly, her eyes sweeping the room. For a single heart-stopping second, their eyes met. Mark saw no recognition, no pain, no anger, no longing. She didn't see Mark, her ex-husband, the man who had destroyed her. She saw a man in a tuxedo standing where he shouldn't be, being turned away by security. She held his gaze for half a second, and then she looked right through him. She turned back to the senator and continued her conversation. That more than the Rolls-Royce, more than Harrison, was the blow that shattered him. It wasn't that she hated him. It was that she didn't see him at all. He had been relegated from ballast to simple, irrelevant background noise. "Mark!" Chloe was hissing at him from across the floor. "What are you doing? You look like a stalker. Get over here!" He stumbled back, his face burning with a shame so profound it tasted like acid. His perfect night, his perfect wife, his perfect life. It all felt like a cheap imitation, a child's drawing next to a masterpiece. He rejoined his wife, his smile now a painful, frozen mask. She looked right at me," he whispered, horrified. "Good," Chloe snapped. "She should be ashamed of herself showing her face here. Now fix your tie. My father's coming over. He looks upset." Mark looked up. Michael Reed was indeed striding toward them. But he wasn't upset. He was terrified. His face was pale, his hands were shaking, and he was staring slack-jawed at the woman on the dais. "Michael, what's wrong?" Mark asked. "That's her," Michael Reed whispered, his voice cracking. "The one from the acquisition papers. The holding company. Hayes. S. Hayes. That's her." Mark didn't understand. "What are you talking about?" "She's not with Harrison, Mark." Michael groaned, his hand gripping Mark's shoulder so tightly it hurt. "She is Harrison. She's the new CEO. She's the one—" "Dear God. She's the one who just bought my company." The blood didn't just drain from Mark's face. It evaporated. He felt lightheaded, the sound of the string quartet suddenly muffled as if he were underwater. "What? That's not possible," Mark stammered. "Bought Michael. We just posted our best quarter. The board was thrilled. I finalized the reports myself." "The reports were lies, Mark." Michael hissed, his voice a venomous whisper. He pulled Mark and Chloe into a secluded alcove, his eyes wild. "You and your creative accounting. You shuffled the debt from the shipping portfolio. You didn't hide it. You consolidated it. You made it a single perfect target. I stabilized us. You made us easy to kill." Michael choked, looking like he was going to be sick. "They didn't buy the company, you idiot. They bought the debt, all of it. The margin call came from a single entity this morning. CG Ventures. I thought it was a competitor. It's a shell for Harrison Global. And the signatory on the final execution was S. Hayes." Chloe for the first time looked truly afraid. Her flawless makeup couldn't hide the panic in her eyes. "Father, what does this mean? What are you saying? Tell them to stop." "You don't tell Marcus Harrison to stop," Michael spat. "He doesn't buy you. He guts you. They... Oh, God." Mark's mind was racing, trying to process the impossible. Sophia. His Sophia. The woman who alphabetized their spice rack. The woman who cried during commercials. She couldn't have orchestrated a multi-billion-dollar corporate raid. "It's a mistake," Mark insisted, grasping at straws. "She must be a front. Harrison is using her name. It's a cruel joke. He found out she was my ex-wife, and he's using her to humiliate me." Michael Reed stared at him with dead, hollow eyes. "You really are that stupid, aren't you? He's not using her. He promoted her. Look at them." The three of them peered from the alcove. The main presentation of the night was beginning. Marcus Harrison had taken the stage to a deafening round of applause. Thank you," Harrison said, his voice calm and powerful. "It's wonderful to be back in New York. I'm not usually one for parties, but tonight is a special occasion. Harrison Global has just completed a major acquisition, one that positions us to revolutionize the global shipping and logistics industry. It was a move orchestrated by a mind I can only describe as one of the most brilliant I have ever encountered." Mark felt his entire body go rigid. "Ladies and gentlemen," Harrison continued, "it is my profound privilege to introduce to you the future of my company, the new CEO of Harrison Global Ventures European Division, Ms. Sophia Hayes." Sophia stepped up to the microphone. The applause was thunderous. She didn't smile, not at first. She simply stood there, owning the silence that followed. "Thank you, Marcus," she said. Her voice, amplified, filled every corner of the vast library. "Thank you, Mr. Mayor, members of the board. What Marcus calls brilliance is quite simply a commitment to seeing what is truly there. For too long, the financial world has rewarded bravado over stability. It has allowed firms to build empires on foundations of sand, leveraging their futures on risky nepotistic bets, all while hiding their toxic assets behind complex paperwork. Every word was a perfectly sharpened knife aimed directly at Mark and Michael. "Our acquisition of Reed Capital Partners," she said, her voice dropping to a clinical chill, "is the first step in a new direction. We will be restructuring the company from the ground up. We will eliminate redundancies. We will clear out the rot. And we will restore value to a portfolio that has been creatively mismanaged." A low, shocked murmur spread through the room. She had just announced the hostile takeover. She had just called Michael Reed's company rot. Chloe made a small, strangled noise. She can't do this." "She just did," Michael whispered. His phone was vibrating, a relentless, frantic buzzing from his pocket. He pulled it out. The screen was a waterfall of panicked texts from his board members. "Mark," Michael said, his voice devoid of all hope. "Your position, your seniority, it's all tied to me. When I'm gone, I'm the COO," Mark said weakly. "I have a contract." "You have nothing," Michael snapped. "Your contract is with my company, and she just bought it. You're a redundancy, Mark. You're the nepotistic bet. You're fired." Mark looked at Sophia, who was now elegantly fielding a question from the senator, looking completely at ease. She was discussing supply chain analytics. He had called her comfortable. He had called her ballast. He had told her she wasn't ambitious, that she was holding him back from the stratosphere. And she had responded by building her own rocket, flying past him and blotting out his sun. He was a fool. He had been a blind, arrogant fool. He hadn't just divorced his wife. He had divorced the very architect of his success. He hadn't just left her with nothing. He had left her with the one thing that mattered, the anger, the drive, and the sheer terrifying intellect he had been too stupid to value. "I have to talk to her," Mark said, a new desperate plan forming. He could apologize. He could beg. He didn't know what he could do, but he had to do something. "Mark, no." Chloe grabbed his arm. But he was already moving. He pushed past his father-in-law, past his weeping wife, and strode onto the floor. He walked directly toward the dais, ignoring the stairs. "Sophia!" he called out. The conversation on the stage stopped. The security guard tensed. Sophia turned, her expression unreadable. "Sophia, please," Mark said, his voice cracking. He was 10 feet from the stage in the middle of the empty, cleared-out space. "We need to talk. This is a mistake. What you're doing. You're destroying my life." Sophia looked down at him from the stage. She didn't look angry. She looked bored. She leaned into the microphone. Her voice was quiet, but it carried across the entire silent ballroom. "I'm sorry," she said, her gaze holding his. "Who are you?" The question hung in the air, a perfect, glittering, cruel blade. "Who are you?" Mark froze. The entire room, the senators, the CEOs, the old money matriarchs, was staring at him. He was a nameless man in a tuxedo shouting at the guest of honor. He was a heckler, a nobody. I'm Mark." He stammered the words, feeling thick and useless in his mouth. "I'm Mark Stafford. He couldn't say, your ex-husband. It would be the final pathetic nail in his coffin. Sophia tilted her head, a flicker of something, not recognition, but cold analysis in her eyes. "Mr. Stafford." "Ah, yes." She turned to Marcus Harrison. Mr. Stafford was the chief operating officer at Reed Capital. Was being the operative word? The small dark chuckle from Harrison cut Mark deeper than any insult. "Ms. Hayes, Sophia, please," Mark begged, taking another step. The granite-jawed security guard was suddenly at his side, a heavy hand on his bicep. "Sir, I'm going to have to ask you to leave." "No. Let go of me." Mark struggled, his dignity evaporating. "Sophia, you did this. You planned all of this. This was revenge." He'd shouted it. The word revenge echoed in the vast, frescoed hall. Sophia watched him struggle against the guard, her expression unchanged. She was watching him as she would watch a failing data point on a screen. "Revenge, Mr. Stafford?" she asked, her voice calm. She stepped away from the podium and walked to the edge of the dais, looking down at him. The security guard paused, waiting for her signal. "You're flattering yourself," Sophia said, her voice no longer amplified, meant only for him, though the front rows could hear every word. "Revenge is an emotional response. What's the word you used to like messy? This wasn't messy. This was comfortable." She used his own word, and it was like a physical blow. Reed Capital was a vulnerability in our new logistics portfolio. She continued, her tone conversational, as if explaining a simple math problem to a child. "It was over-leveraged and poorly managed. Your algorithm, or rather my algorithm, the one you've been misusing for 2 years, was the only thing keeping it afloat. It was a house of cards and the wind was coming. I didn't knock it over, Mark. I just bought the plot of land it was built on. My life, my job." "Your job," she interrupted, "was a symptom of the rot. I don't take revenge, Mark. I solve problems. You, Michael Reed, your entire insecure self-congratulatory ecosystem. You were a problem, and now you're solved." She gave a small, almost imperceptible nod to the guard. "Let's go, sir." The guard's grip was iron. He began to march Mark not toward the grand exit, but toward a side door, a service entrance. The walk of shame. As he was being dragged away, Mark looked back. He saw Chloe, his wife, his trophy. She was not looking at him. She was surrounded by her friends, who were keeping a polite, horrified distance. Her father was on the phone, his back to her, gesticulating wildly, his face purple. Chloe was utterly alone. She looked at Mark, her expression not one of support, but of pure, undiluted hatred. He had failed her. He had lost her the kingdom. He was half dragged, half pushed through the heavy oak door. It slammed shut, and he was in a brightly lit, linoleum-tiled service hallway. The smell of industrial disinfectant and cooked-over prime rib filled his nostrils. He slumped against the wall, the adrenaline leaving him replaced by a cold, hollowing dread. It wasn't just the job. It was the apartment, which was a corporate lease. It was the car, also corporate. It was the country club membership. It was the credit lines, all of which were guaranteed by Reed Capital. He had built his entire identity on a foundation of sand, just as she'd said, and the tide had just come in. He thought of her final words, "I solve problems." The twist wasn't that she had shown up. The twist wasn't that she was with a billionaire. The twist was that it had never been about him. He wasn't the antagonist in her story. He wasn't even a supporting character. He was a line item in a risk assessment report. He was a rounding error she'd just erased. He heard a door open down the hall. It was Chloe. Her face was a ruin of streaming mascara and rage. "You!" she hissed, walking toward him, her diamonds looking cheap in the fluorescent light. "Chloe, listen, we can fix this." Smack. Her hand, heavy with the rings he'd bought her, cracked across his face. "Fix it. You idiot. You absolute fool. You didn't just lose your job. You lost my money. My father's company. Everything. Chloe, she's my ex-wife. I can talk to her. I can..." "Talk to her? She just humiliated you in front of the entire city." Chloe was screaming now, her voice raw. "She looked at you like you were dirt, and she was right. You are nothing. You were nothing when I found you, and you're nothing now. You were just a trade up, and it was a bad trade." She spat the words at him. She pulled the massive diamond ring from her finger, the one he'd been so proud of, and threw it. The ring skittered across the floor and disappeared under a utility sink. "Our lawyers will be in touch," she said, mimicking his own words from 2 years prior. "Don't make it messy." She turned her heels, clicking angrily, and stormed back into the gala, leaving him alone in the hallway, the red imprint of her hand burning on his cheek. The heavy oak door of the service exit clicked shut, a final, definitive sound that seemed to punctuation the end of an entire era. For a moment, the faint, hysterical echo of Chloe's shriek hung in the air, a pathetic counterpoint to the restored elegance of the string quartet. Sophia watched the door, her expression as placid and still as a deep lake. She registered the event, the ugly, bright red flash of human misery, but she did not feel it. It did not touch her. It was data processed and discarded. Marcus Harrison materialized at her elbow, as silent as ever. He wasn't holding champagne. He held a single tall glass of sparkling water with a lime. He knew she never drank alcohol when she was working, and tonight, above all, was a night of work. "Well," he said, his voice a low, dry rasp that cut through the renewed party chatter. "That was theatrical. He seems to have a flair for it." Sophia accepted the water, her fingers cool and steady against the glass. "He always did," she replied, her voice just as quiet. "He was prone to dramatics. He mistook them for passion. It was one of his many inefficiencies." "He's the COO you mentioned in the acquisition brief?" Harrison asked, though he knew the answer. "The husband." "The ex-husband," Sophia corrected, taking a small, clean sip. The water was crisp and cold. And CUU was a title, not a function. It was a gift from his father-in-law. What did Mark call it, a sign-on bonus for the marriage. Harrison studied her, his gaze sharp. He was a man who read people the way she read financial code, looking for the bugs, the vulnerabilities, the hidden lines of logic. "Are you all right?" Sophia turned to look at him, and for the first time that night a small, genuine smile touched her lips. It was not a smile of triumph or joy. It was a smile of completion. "Marcus," she said, "in the last 18 months I built Cassandra from a theoretical model into the most powerful predictive engine in private finance. In the last 3 months, I orchestrated a silent $9 billion acquisition of a company that was a systemic rot in our new logistics portfolio." Tonight I delivered a keynote to the most powerful people in New York, and in doing so announced our new market dominance and provided regulatory clarity on a firm built on lies. I am excellent. Good. He nodded, satisfied. Because Michael Reed is currently in the West Hall trying to get the mayor to arrest you for securities fraud and corporate espionage. This time Sophia did laugh. It was a real quiet laugh, a sound of genuine intellectual amusement. Let him. The only fraud was his last 4 quarterly reports, which he and Mark signed off on. My team flagged those discrepancies 6 months ago. We forwarded the entire unedited file to the Securities and Exchange Commission this afternoon, time-stamped exactly 1 hour before the acquisition was finalized. I believe the term is providing regulatory clarity. It ensures all parties are held accountable. Ruthless, Ms. Hayes. I like it. Harrison said, a rare glint of approval in his eyes. Clarity, Mr. Harrison? Just clarity, she replied. She had told Mark it wasn't revenge, and it wasn't. Not in the hot, emotional, messy way he understood. Revenge was for people who were still hurting. She was not hurting. She was healed. What she had done was the financial equivalent of a surgeon removing a tumor. The tumor in this case had been her past. It was a neat, clinical, and total excision. The fact that the tumor had screamed on its way to the incinerator was simply an unfortunate, if not entirely unsatisfying, side effect. She looked out over the ballroom. The party was fractured. The elegant facade had cracked. Small, anxious groups had formed, heads huddled together. People were on their phones, their expressions ranging from shock to predatory glee. The sharks were smelling blood, and Reed Capital was the chum. She could see them, the VPs from rival firms, the hedge fund managers, all calculating, planning how to pick at the scraps of Michael Reed's shattered empire. They didn't know, of course, that Harrison Global hadn't just bought the debt. It had bought the assets. There would be no scraps left to pick. Sophia, however, was finished. She had done what she came to do. Marcus, if you'll excuse me, she said, placing her untouched water glass on a passing tray. I believe my work here is done. I have a 6 a.m. flight back to London. We have a board to brief on the restructuring. Of course. The car is waiting, he said. He offered his arm not as a romantic gesture, but as an escort, a colleague, an equal. They walked not to the service exit, but back through the center of the grand ballroom. The path cleared before them once again, but this time it wasn't the imposing line of security. It was a wave of pure, unadulterated power. The crowd parted, a sea of silk and diamonds receding from their presence. The whispers were audible. That's her. The one who... My God, she gutted him. As they reached the grand marble entrance, Sophia paused for just a second. She looked back at the glittering room, the massive chandeliers, the sea of arrogant, suddenly frightened faces. She remembered the first time she'd been to an event like this years ago on Mark's arm. She'd been terrified, wearing a dress on loan from a friend, clutching his hand. He had let go almost immediately, striding off to network. Stay here, Soph, he'd said, a dismissive wave of his hand. Try not to look so impressed. The adults are talking. She had spent that night by the canapé table feeling like a fraud, a comfortable, useless accessory. Now she saw the room for what it was. Not a palace, but a fish tank. A small, self-contained ecosystem of predators and prey. And she was no longer one of the little fish darting nervously in the weeds. She wasn't even one of the sharks. She was the person who owned the tank. She turned and walked out into the cool October night air. The black Rolls-Royce was waiting at the curb, its engine a silent promise of power. The driver, the same one from her arrival, held the door. She got in the bespoke leather seat, cool and solid against her back. As the heavy door shut, sealing her in opulent silence, the car pulled away from the curb as smooth as a sigh. It paused at the corner, waiting for the light to change. And in that moment, she looked out the window. The service door she had been watching earlier burst open, and 2 of the venue's security guards, not Harrison's team, unceremoniously pushed Mark onto the pavement. He stumbled, his $5,000 tuxedo jacket askew, a dark stain of what looked like spilled wine or coffee down the front. His silk tie was undone, hanging limply. His face was a mask of ruin, pale and sweaty under the harsh glare of the streetlights. And on his left cheek, a vivid red welt was already rising, the imprint of Chloe's hand, heavy with the rings he had bought her. He looked up desperate and disoriented, and his eyes, wide with a dawning, bottomless horror, met hers through the tinted glass. He saw her. He saw the car. He saw the impassive driver. He saw the woman sitting in the back, bathed in the soft glowing light of the dash, looking at him. Sophia did not look away. She did not sneer. She did not smile. She did not offer pity or scorn. She simply held his gaze, her expression one of utter, final, and absolute indifference. It was the look one gave to a line of code that had been debugged and erased. A problem that no longer existed. A variable that had been neutralized. He was a ghost. He was ballast long since jettisoned. The light changed. The car with a whisper slid into the river of New York traffic. Mark Stafford, a man who had traded his entire future for a hollow trophy, was gone, disappearing into the city's indifferent past where he belonged. Sophia Hayes, CEO, leaned her head back against the soft leather. She did not look back. She pulled her tablet from her briefcase. The screen lit up, illuminating her face with its cool blue light. She opened the file for the London board meeting and began to review the first slide of her restructuring plan. She was in the stratosphere now, and the view was crystal clear. They say success is the best revenge, but for Sophia it was just success. She didn't need to tear Mark's world down. She just needed to build her own so high that he was no longer visible. She took the pain of his betrayal and forged it into a weapon of ambition, proving that the person he called ballast was actually the only thing giving him flight. What did you think of Sophia's ultimate comeback? Was it a cold, calculated revenge, or was it simply the inevitable result of her brilliance being set free? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. If you love this story of drama and transformation, please be sure to hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to see a true power move, and don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more real-life stories every single week. We'll see you in the next one.
Stop everything. Imagine your world shattering into a million pieces when the person you trusted most brutally discards you, pregnant and penniless, onto a dark, rain-soaked street. That horrifying nightmare became Mariana White's reality. The night millionaire Darius Stone, her husband and supposed soulmate, callously locked the doors of their luxurious Havenport condo behind her. In an instant, she went from glamorous wife of a celebrated real estate mogul to homeless outcast, clutching nothing but a battered suitcase, shivering beneath flickering streetlights. Behind Stone's glossy public image as the city's unstoppable entrepreneur lay twisted secrets and ruthless betrayal. A cocktail so potent it ripped apart Mariana's dreams of family and stability. Little did Darius realize, however, that the woman he heartlessly cast aside would one day storm back, not as a desperate beggar pleading for scraps, but as the powerful force that would seize control of his entire empire. Their tragic story began years earlier in the bustling heart of Havenport, a city of towering ambition, where sleek skyscrapers rose above streets teeming with dreamers and hustlers. From his humble beginnings in a cramped neighborhood filled with cracked sidewalks and fading dreams, Darius Stone had emerged as a legend in the making, driven by a fiery ambition to build an empire from nothing. It was in the dim glow of a college coffee shop that his path first crossed with Mariana's, a brilliant and determined marketing student whose quiet intensity instantly captivated him. Together they were unstoppable, or so Mariana believed. But beneath the romantic promises whispered in late-night study sessions lay the seeds of Darius's darker desires. Ambition twisted into obsession, love corrupted by greed, and the first hints of the betrayal that would soon destroy them both. Viewer engagement prompt. Comment 1 if you think Mariana's comeback will shock Darius to his core, or 2 if you believe he'll never see it coming. In those early days, Darius's brilliance blazed like a comet, promising a future filled with wealth and possibility. Mariana, for her part, had grown up in a more stable but unremarkable family in the suburbs of Havenport. Her parents were librarians, a calm, bookish couple who nurtured her intellectual curiosity but rarely ventured beyond their comfort zone. From them, Mariana inherited a quiet determination and a yearning for more than a tidy suburban existence. While Darius talked of skyrocketing startups and bold real estate maneuvers, Mariana was drawn to the nuance of consumer psychology, the why behind people's purchasing decisions. She excelled in marketing, quickly establishing herself among classmates as the go-to person for ideas that made even the dullest product appealing. Their romance blossomed in the unlikeliest corners: messy dorm kitchens, group study sessions that stretched into midnight, and discount pizza joints. They fell for each other's contrasts. Mariana found Darius's laser-focused ambition exhilarating, and he admired her balanced, empathetic approach. It felt like together they could fuse vision with practicality, forging a life that transcended either alone. Soon, Darius's real estate forays began to pay off. He left the classroom for networking events where he'd pitch small-town developers on flipping neglected buildings in up-and-coming neighborhoods. The profits were modest at first, but they hinted at bigger victories on the horizon. Within a few years, Darius had launched his own firm, Stone Pinnacle Holdings, a moniker the local press deemed prophetic for a man dead set on climbing to the peak of success. Newfound investors funneled dollars into his projects, trusting that his name would multiply their returns. Mariana, having graduated near the top of her class, took on a reputable marketing position at a mid-sized agency. She didn't mind the 9-to-5 constraints as it gave her a chance to refine her skills and watch real professionals handle corporate branding budgets. It all seemed perfect. In a candlelit proposal at a quaint bistro, Darius slipped a ring onto Mariana's finger, a modest diamond, but a gleaming symbol of their shared future. They married in a small ceremony, attended mostly by close friends and the handful of relatives who could travel. For a time, the marriage felt like a fairy tale newly minted, the driven entrepreneur and the savvy marketer, forging a unit unstoppable. Viewer engagement prompt: did you ever have a perfect on the surface relationship that later crumbled? Share your story in the chat if you're comfortable, or just type yes if you can relate. The first signs of trouble crept in as Darius's real estate coups catapulted him from local hero to a well-known name in Havenport's business circles. The firm's early success earned him headlines in the local business journal, with speculation that he might soon crack the national market. Every upward tick in his fortune brought with it an expanding coterie of admirers, opportunists, and sycophants. Mariana watched uncomfortably as Darius stopped coming home for dinner on time, often whisked away to lavish networking soirees in glass-walled skyscrapers where million-dollar deals were sealed over cocktails. She tried to rationalize it. Building a legacy demanded sacrifice, and these events were integral to forging the powerful relationships that fed Stone Pinnacle Holdings. Yet she couldn't ignore the slow, creeping changes in Darius's demeanor. He'd returned from those gatherings with a glint in his eye, a mixture of triumph and something else, a hunger for more. His gentle teasing turned into condescending remarks whenever she voiced concern about his well-being or the enormous risks he was taking. Their romantic candlelit dinners morphed into sporadic takeout nights with Darius, half distracted, toggling between phone calls. When Mariana discovered she was pregnant, her heart soared. She believed this milestone might tether them back to what truly mattered. The evening she revealed the news, she organized a sweet, private celebration, a home-cooked meal in their freshly upgraded condo on Havenport's Bay. But when Darius came in, late from yet another real estate pitch, his reaction was tempered excitement overshadowed by a barrage of phone notifications. She pressed him for reassurance that fatherhood was something he wanted. Between scrolling texts and quick glances at her hopeful face, he promised everything would be fine, just as soon as he closed his next big deal. Unbeknownst to Mariana, however, a different kind of deal had already been struck. Over the past few months, Darius had become entangled with Aurora Knight, a striking, statuesque consultant who specialized in high-stakes property negotiations. She was smart, beautiful, and more crucially, shared Darius's unbridled appetite for wealth, prestige, and risk. If Mariana was the soothing voice of reason, Aurora was the excitement of living dangerously, A spark that took root in the cracks of a marriage stretched too thin. Viewer engagement prompt, type 1, if you suspect Aurora spells serious trouble, or 2 if you think Darius can resist temptation. Let us know your thoughts. Aurora Knight was not the type to settle for the sideline. Her networking savvy could rival Darius's own, and she made no secret of her fascination with his rising star. Word spread that they had been seen together at exclusive lounges, exchanging laughter and whispered confessions. A handful of Darius's friends, those who still cared for Mariana, tried to warn him that he was playing with fire, but he dismissed them. After all, success had never let him down before. For Mariana, the suspicion that something was wrong pricked her subconscious long before the evidence became undeniable. Darius's late returns, his evasive answers about who he was meeting, the hush that fell whenever his phone buzzed at midnight, these pointed to a betrayal she desperately hoped wasn't real. But as her belly grew, so did the gap between them. The once affectionate banter about baby names and nursery colors evaporated, replaced by half-hearted nods, while Darius obsessed over property expansions in far-flung regions. It wasn't until Mariana discovered a lipstick-stained business card in Darius's car that everything fell into place. The name on the card was none other than Aurora Knight, complete with scrawled notes about penthouse showings. Trembling with anger and heartbreak, Mariana confronted him in their condo's living room, tears brimming as she demanded an explanation. Darius's response was cold, dismissive. "You're overreacting. Aurora is just a business ally, nothing else." His body language told a different story, and Mariana knew better than to trust the calm in his voice. Days later, the inevitable confrontation exploded. Aurora herself appeared in a swirl of perfume at an industry gala Mariana had chosen to skip. Gossip from the event reached Mariana quickly. How Darius and Aurora were nearly inseparable all night, disappearing for long stretches. That was the final straw. Heartbroken, Mariana planned to leave, to collect her belongings and move in with a friend if she had to. But Darius acted first. In a move that would forever alter Mariana's life, he told her to get out of the condo. He was done pretending, done with fatherhood, done with marriage. In mere hours, she found herself exiled, pregnant, clinging to a half-packed suitcase. Viewer engagement prompt. If you've ever been blindsided by heartbreak, type heartbreak in the comments. Let's show Mariana some support. A frigid wind whipped across the sidewalk as Mariana stood outside the condo she once called home, trying to decide her next move. The swirling air stung at her cheeks, but nothing could compare to the hollow ache in her chest. Inside her car, she shivered, not just from the chill, but from the shock of what Darius had done. Only a few months prior, they had sipped wine in celebration of his skyrocketing real estate success. Now she was homeless in that same city, with a baby kicking in her womb, a battered credit card in her wallet, and nowhere to turn. It didn't take long for her meager funds to drain. A week's stay at a dingy motel on the outskirts of Havenport devoured most of what she had left. Too ashamed to call her parents, who were already strapped for finances, Mariana applied for part-time jobs and scoured the internet for any discount sublet she could find. Pride and heartbreak tangled in her throat whenever she considered calling Darius for help. Pride won. She would never beg from him, not after the cruelty he'd shown. One evening, Mariana settled on a battered armchair in the motel's modest lobby, scanning classified ads on her phone. The gentle hum of a vending machine and the flicker of fluorescent lights made the scene feel like a fragment from someone else's life. It was there she met Tiffany Flynn, a kind soul who worked the front desk on nights and recognized Mariana's desperation. After hearing snippets of her story, Tiffany offered a lead. A friend of a friend had a small loft above a sewing supply store near the industrial district. It was cheap, not exactly glamorous, but it might do until Mariana could get on her feet. With zero alternatives in sight, Mariana took the offer. The loft was cramped, walls peeling, the faint smell of machine oil drifting through the vents. But it was hers, a sanctuary where she could gather her thoughts. Each time her baby shifted inside her, she closed her eyes, whispering gentle reassurances that they would find a way. She applied for every marketing-related job she could find, eventually landing a short-term contract doing digital promotion for a local arts festival. Small steps, but her determination flared brighter each day. Phénomène. Viewer engagement prompt. Where are you reading this from? Give a shout out to your city in the comments. Mariana's days turned into a balancing act of survival and aspiration. By morning, she worked her contract marketing job, drafting social media campaigns that boosted attendance at the arts festival. By afternoon, she visited food banks, navigating the myriad forms and regulations needed to secure even a little assistance. Late at night, she'd collapse on a second-hand sofa in the loft, ankles swollen from pregnancy and heart pounding with an undercurrent of anxiety about tomorrow. She found a small circle of supporters, Tiffany at the motel, a gentle neighbor in the building next door who sometimes offered grocery discounts, and occasionally an artist from the festival who admired her skill and gave her freelance leads. Through these interactions, Mariana's faith in humanity glimmered. Not everyone in Havenport was blinded by wealth and power. Many, like her, were just trying to carve a decent life in a city that rewarded the loudest, most aggressive voices. About 6 months into her pregnancy, she encountered her former boss from the mid-sized agency she had worked at before. He was surprised to see her in a faded coat, rummaging through a clearance bin at a stationery store. Sensing she needed help, he floated the possibility of part-time remote work. Grateful, Mariana quickly accepted, pulling every ounce of her marketing expertise to churn out successful branding proposals for small businesses, hair salons, local bakeries, fledgling e-commerce shops. The pay wasn't stellar, but it was enough to secure more stable housing as her due date approached. Deep down, a kernel of resentment toward Darius threatened to take root. She'd catch glimpses of him on local news segments or read puff pieces about Stone Pinnacle Holdings' expansions to new markets. The betrayal still burned hot, but Mariana recognized it would only crush her spirit if she allowed her anger to define her. Instead, she harnessed that fire to propel her forward. She kept meticulous records of every successful marketing project she spearheaded, determined to someday launch her own agency. If Darius was forging a path of meteoric success, she would painstakingly build her own, brick by brick, until that day she could stand tall on her own terms. Viewer engagement prompt. Press like if you've ever taken a painful situation and turned it into motivation to keep pushing forward. By the time baby Noah arrived, a spirited boy with wide, curious eyes, Mariana was living in a modest but clean one-bedroom apartment in a neighborhood of aging brick row homes. Holding her newborn son in her arms, she felt both terrified and empowered. This tiny human depended on her entirely. Any illusions she once harbored about a triumphant reconciliation with Darius had crumbled months before. He hadn't called, texted, or acknowledged the birth in any way. The heartbreak was real, but Noah's existence anchored her, giving her a sense of resolve she hadn't known she possessed. Between feeding schedules and diaper changes, Mariana pored over business articles, marketing case studies, and entrepreneurial podcasts. She studied how small agencies scaled into formidable consultancies. She took notes on leadership, brand storytelling, and forging investor relationships. Though she was juggling the demands of single motherhood on a shoestring budget, a new dream crystallized in her mind: to open her own marketing firm, one that would champion local startups and businesses that, like her, were underdogs in a crowded city of giants. Her part-time contract work expanded as word of her marketing prowess spread among small business circles. Mariana's campaigns were strategic yet personal, capturing the heart and soul of each client's brand without the sterile approach many large agencies favored. Meanwhile, every so often, she would catch a snippet of news about Stone Pinnacle Holdings. Darius was rumored to be forging deals in neighboring states, raking in profits that made local headlines. Gossip about Aurora Knight had cooled. Some rumored she and Darius had parted ways, though Mariana rarely cared to delve into the details. All that truly mattered was building the life she deserved with Noah. When he was 9 months old, she took her biggest leap yet, filing paperwork to establish White Spark Marketing. The name represented both her identity and a promise that she could ignite success for any client who entrusted her with their brand. She roped in 2 talented friends as freelance collaborators, a graphic designer and a social media specialist. They met in her cramped living room, hashing out strategies over coffee, while little Noah crawled around, beaming at this display of unstoppable determination. Viewer engagement prompt. If you're loving Mariana's resilience, type "never give up" in the comments below. Let's cheer her on. White Spark Marketing began humbly, taking on modest projects from grassroots nonprofits and mom-and-pop shops. But as Mariana's track record of transforming small brands into recognizable local names grew, so did her client roster. Within a year, she upgraded from her living room to a shared co-working space downtown. Nothing lavish, just a cluster of desks amidst other hopeful entrepreneurs. Her small team branched out, adding a part-time copywriter and an event coordinator to handle client demands. Mariana, fueled by her unwavering commitment to Noah, hustled tirelessly. That was when an unexpected opportunity came knocking. An up-and-coming eco-friendly home goods store wanted a full-fledged rebranding campaign, from packaging to social media presence. Mariana and her team seized the challenge, and the campaign went viral in Havenport's green living circles. The store quadrupled its sales within 2 months. Word spread beyond the city limits. Soon, White Spark began drawing interest from bigger businesses that previously would never have considered a tiny outfit led by a young single mother. During this time, Mariana grappled with balancing motherhood and her rapidly accelerating career. Afternoons, she'd slip away to attend Noah's daycare recitals, cheering louder than any other parent in the room, then rush back to the office to oversee a crucial design mock-up. Nights blurred into a haze of drafting proposals, feeding the baby, and grabbing whatever sleep she could manage. When stress threatened to overwhelm her, she'd revisit her darkest memory, standing on a rainy sidewalk with her suitcase, and remind herself she had no choice but to move forward. Meanwhile, Stone Pinnacle Holdings dominated real estate headlines. Darius was apparently unstoppable, forging high-risk, high-reward deals that ballooned his empire. Rumors hinted at questionable partnerships with overseas financiers and ballooning debt that was masked by flashy new acquisitions. Some in the financial world whispered that Darius's empire was a house of cards waiting to topple, but the media had always been enamored with his charismatic persona, so the warnings remained hushed. As Mariana's star quietly rose, however, it brushed closer and closer to the orbit of Stone Pinnacle Holdings, hinting at a cosmic collision neither party could foresee. Viewer engagement prompt. Do you believe Mariana's success will force Darius to finally take notice? Drop your prediction in the comments. Havenport's business community might have been expansive, but success stories had a way of intertwining. Mariana received a phone call from a corporate client eager to rebrand one of their poorly performing shopping complexes. It was a lucrative project, the kind that could catapult White Spark into a new league. The hitch? The corporate client was a subsidiary of Stone Pinnacle Holdings. Upon reading the contract details, Mariana's hands trembled. If she accepted, she would be working, albeit indirectly, for the same empire that once disowned her. Though apprehensive, Mariana weighed the potential benefits. Turning down a project of that magnitude would slow her agency's growth. Besides, it wasn't as though she would be answering directly to Darius Stone himself. Middle management typically oversaw these initiatives. After careful deliberation and consultation with her tight-knit team, she decided to pitch. The presentation day arrived. Mariana donned her best professional attire, collected her portfolio, and marched into the glass and steel tower that bore Stone Pinnacle's name in bold letters. Memories threatened to unsteady her. Her old life as the millionaire's wife, the humiliating confrontation, the heartbreak. But she breathed in, steadied her pulse, and reminded herself of who she had become: a successful CEO, a capable mother, an independent force. In the boardroom, she met a small group of company managers. They were polite yet guarded, firing off questions about social media strategy, local marketing tie-ins, and ROI projections. Mariana dazzled them with her thoroughness. She had data, creative concepts, and a track record of turning lackluster brands into local sensations. Each slide of her pitch hammered home the synergy that White Spark could offer. By the end of the meeting, the managers exchanged impressed glances. Days later, Mariana's phone rang. White Spark had won the contract. She exhaled a wave of relief and nervous excitement. For the next several months, she and her team poured their creativity into revitalizing that struggling shopping complex. Their ideas spanned monthly themed events, influencer engagements, and strategic partnerships with community organizations. None of the mid-level managers mentioned Darius by name, and for a while Mariana almost forgot whose umbrella she now worked under. Almost. Viewer engagement prompt. Type Team Mariana if you think she'll handle this new challenge like a pro, or Team Darius if you sense he'll pull a surprise move soon. Just as White Spark's campaign began showing real traction, increasing foot traffic by 40%, a tectonic shift occurred at Stone Pinnacle Holdings. Rumors of massive debts came to light, swirling inside the hush-hush world of finance. A series of high-stakes deals had gone sour. Overseas partners withdrew their funding, and the interest on outstanding loans had ballooned to catastrophic levels. Suddenly, what once seemed an unassailable empire teetered on the brink of financial collapse. Darius Stone's golden aura faded as investors demanded answers. Lawsuits from jilted stakeholders loomed, and negative press painted him as reckless. The Stone Pinnacle Tower, once a symbol of unstoppable success, now hummed with anxious chatter. Many in the city had never forgotten the scathing rumors about Darius's personal conduct, but they were overshadowed by his empire's sheen. Now, with that sheen cracked, the resentment swelled. Inside the subsidiary where Mariana's team worked, employees felt the quake. Managers who praised her marketing results whispered apologies about potential budget cuts. Mariana, who had thrown herself into the project, realized that the entire corporate structure might implode, unraveling her months of labor. White Spark would be paid for its services so far, but if Stone Pinnacle folded, the chance to see the project through to completion and the reputational boost that came with it might vanish overnight. However, as uncertain as this scenario was, it opened a door she never expected. A quiet conversation with an old friend who worked in Stone Pinnacle's finance department revealed that Darius was desperate for a lifeline. The company's stock was plummeting, and large chunks of its debt were being sold at bargain bin prices to debt collectors and opportunistic investors. If no one stepped in to restructure the organization, bankruptcy loomed on the horizon. Mariana's mind buzzed with the enormity of it all. Stone Pinnacle was about to hit rock bottom, just like she once had. But this time, she had the means, the connections, and a personal stake in its future. If someone had told her she might one day attempt a takeover of Darius Stone's empire, especially after being thrown out onto the street with nothing but a small suitcase, she would have laughed it off as a twisted fantasy. But now, the possibility felt startlingly real. Viewer engagement prompt. Would you take the chance to buy out an ex who wronged you, or would you walk away? Share your thoughts. As Stone Pinnacle Holdings scrambled for survival, Mariana quietly turned to the handful of investors she'd built relationships with over White Spark's meteoric rise. Chief among them was Elias Montgomery, a venture capitalist who'd once told her that underestimating a determined single mother was one of the biggest mistakes any business person could make. Over lunch in a downtown bistro, she laid out the precarious situation at Stone Pinnacle. Teetering on the edge but still possessing valuable assets, brand recognition, and prime real estate holdings. Elias, a pragmatic but visionary investor, listened intently as Mariana explained how, with the right financial injection and a top-down leadership overhaul, Stone Pinnacle could not only recover, but flourish. The synergy between White Spark's innovative marketing approach and Stone Pinnacle's once formidable property assets was tempting. Elias's eyes gleamed with interest. If debts were cheap and the company's real estate portfolio was still worth millions, this could be the deal of a lifetime. For both profit and a moral triumph, if he so chose. Of course, the plan would mean stepping into the lion's den. Darius Stone was not known for relinquishing control easily, especially not to Mariana, the woman he'd cruelly dismissed. But if Stone Pinnacle's board was desperate, and if enough debt holders demanded a restructuring, Darius might find himself with no options. Mariana told Elias she wanted to approach the situation with a measure of diplomacy. She wasn't out solely for revenge, though she wouldn't shy away from claiming the helm if it meant securing the company's future and safeguarding the livelihoods of its employees. Intrigued, Elias set up a meeting with a small consortium of investors, each curious about acquiring Stone Pinnacle's debts at a steep discount. Mariana's heart thundered when she realized what that entailed. Piece by piece, they'd collect the notes that gave them legal power over the firm's assets. Once they owned a controlling stake of the debt, they could propose a rescue plan, one that would likely oust Darius and install new leadership. And that leadership, in the eyes of the consortium, was Mariana White, the marketing maven who'd already rescued one of their failing projects. Daronewar viewer engagement prompt. Give us a thumbs up if you think Mariana's plan is genius, or a thumbs down if you believe it's too risky. The following weeks were a blur of clandestine negotiations. Mariana, Elias, and the consortium meticulously tracked each block of Stone Pinnacle's debt as it came up for sale. They pounced on deals the moment panicked creditors listed them. Meanwhile, Darius's circle devolved into frantic chaos. Key employees jumped ship to safer companies, while the board demanded daily updates on any potential lifeline. Aurora Knight's name surfaced in the rumor mill. She was nowhere to be found, rumored to be cozying up to a different millionaire abroad. Tension at Stone Pinnacle soared so high that some employees even started posting confidential documents online out of desperation, hoping to lure a White Knight investor. Darius spent long days closeted with bankers who offered miserable terms that would relegate him to a powerless figurehead. He refused them all, clinging to hope that some miracle would restore his autonomy. During this chaotic period, Mariana kept a low profile in the Stone Pinnacle offices. She and her White Spark team maintained the marketing efforts for the shopping complex project as best they could. The budget was under threat, but ironically, the foot traffic improvements provided one of the few bright spots in the company's quarterly reports. It was testament to Mariana's work that some board members began to wonder if she might be the stable influence they needed to refocus the empire. No one yet realized the extent to which Mariana had orchestrated the new consortium's debt grab, but as the tipping point neared, finance experts everywhere started noticing unusual transactions. Anonymous buyers picked up huge swaths of Stone Pinnacle's distressed bonds. Speculation mounted that the company might be forcibly restructured. Conspiracy theories abounded, naming everyone from foreign hedge funds to government agencies. At last, Darius received a summons from the newly consolidated debt holder group, requesting a formal hearing with the Stone Pinnacle board to present a restructuring proposal. The news lit up the city's business media like a lightning strike in a dark sky. Darius felt his heart sink. He sensed that whoever controlled this consortium had the power to strip him of everything. Little did he know that the face behind the takeover was the very woman he'd once cast aside without pity. Viewer engagement prompt. It's about to go down. Type showdown if you're ready for the epic face-off between Mariana and Darius. On the day of the hearing, Stone Pinnacle's board convened in the grandest conference room of the tower's top floor. Gone was the hubris that usually colored such gatherings. An almost funereal hush draped the space. Darius stood at the table's head, fists clenched at his sides, shoulders tense as a wire. The board members filed in, their expressions a blend of apprehension and resignation. A knock broke the silence. In strode Elias Montgomery, accompanied by a small retinue of sharply dressed financiers. Mariana walked behind them, clipboard in hand, posture poised. She wore a tailored black blazer that exuded calm authority, worlds away from the shaken woman who once pleaded at Darius's doorstep. The hush intensified the moment everyone recognized her. Eyes darted to Darius, whose face had blanched into disbelief. Elias introduced himself and the group. He then handed the floor to Mariana, whose voice didn't waver as she explained, in measured terms, the consortium's plan for rescuing Stone Pinnacle. The firm was on the verge of insolvency, and an immediate injection of capital was required. Capital that this group now controlled through the debt they had purchased. In exchange, they demanded changes in executive leadership and corporate structure, ensuring transparency and a stable growth path. Darius attempted to interrupt, his voice trembling with outrage, but the board chair motioned for him to wait. Mariana continued, mapping out how White Spark's marketing expertise would be integrated across Stone Pinnacle's entire real estate portfolio, cutting unnecessary PR costs while optimizing brand value. Her thoroughness impressed even the most skeptical board members, who could see that she wasn't here merely for vengeance. She had a tangible, data-driven plan to rebuild the enterprise. Finally, Darius found his voice. "This is a sham. You orchestrated this to dethrone me," he spat, eyes fixed on Mariana in burning accusation. She held his gaze, shoulders squared, and replied softly, "No, Darius. This is business. The company's collapse would hurt thousands of employees, subcontractors, and their families. I'm here because I can help save it." The quiet conviction in her words rippled through the room. The board, once enamored of Darius's swagger, recognized they needed someone capable, ethical, and forward-thinking, traits Darius had forsaken. Viewer engagement prompt. Do you believe Mariana will emerge victorious from this boardroom drama? Comment victory if you see a win on the horizon. A tense discussion followed, with various board members debating the finer points of the consortium's terms. Some wanted to hold out for a better deal, but the CFO grimly presented the near-empty coffers and the looming deadlines on multiple loan payments. Stone Pinnacle's brand had been battered by negative press, and staff morale was in freefall. Without immediate action, the company would plunge into bankruptcy, a scenario that could wipe out shareholders entirely and lead to massive layoffs. Sensing the board's desperation, Mariana struck a conciliatory tone. She proposed that Darius remain involved as a consultant on specific real estate acquisitions, leveraging his market instincts while removing him from operational control. The move was part gesture of goodwill, part strategic necessity. Some of the board still valued Darius's flair for spotting profitable properties, even if they questioned his judgment in other matters. Embarrassed yet unwilling to walk away, Darius demanded that he be allowed to retain a nominal title. I built this company from scratch, he growled. I won't be reduced to a ghost. Mariana nodded once, acknowledging his request without extending empathy. She had made peace with the fact that his downfall was of his own making. Her concern now was for the employees and the brand they relied on. In a final decisive vote, the board unanimously backed the consortium's proposal, effectively elevating Mariana White to an interim CEO role under a rebranded corporate umbrella, White Sparkstone Holdings. The rebrand aimed to signal a fresh start, melding the credibility of Stone Pinnacle's real estate track record with the innovative marketing vision that Mariana had consistently championed. Cameras flashed from the corridor, capturing the stunned faces as the meeting adjourned. Not long after, a press release circulated announcing that Stone Pinnacle was rescued by a local investor group. The new leadership would uphold the highest standards of integrity and innovation, words that left many in Havenport pointing to Mariana as the polar opposite of the brash millionaire who had once headlined the city's success stories. Darius, for his part, retreated to his once grand corner office. Now the high-backed leather chair felt more like a relic than a throne. Viewer engagement prompt. If you were in Mariana's shoes, would you have offered Darius a consultant role or cut him out entirely? Let's hear your take. With the ink still fresh on the restructuring paperwork, Mariana stepped into her new office, a sleek, minimalist space perched on a high floor overlooking the downtown skyline. It was surreal to think this suite had likely been chosen by Darius for himself, back when he was the king of the tower. She placed a framed photo of Noah on the desk, drawing strength from his mischievous grin. This victory wasn't just about humiliating Darius. It was about securing a stable future for her son and proving to herself, most of all, that one's darkest moment can become a catalyst for greatness. From day one, she dove into the mountain of problems plaguing the newly formed White Sparkstone Holdings. There were toxic vendor contracts to untangle, demoralized employees to encourage, and piles of overdue payments. Yet Mariana had spent years learning how to navigate adversity. She held town hall-style meetings, listening to concerns from lower-level staff. She revamped project workflows and established an internal communications team to squash rumors and keep everyone informed. Small gestures, like personally acknowledging each department's contributions, started to repair trust among employees, many of whom had felt abandoned by the old guard. Meanwhile, White Spark's marketing approach became the backbone of the turnaround strategy. Mariana's team applied the same local-centric, emotionally resonant style of promotion that had catapulted small businesses to local fame. She insisted that real estate developments under the Stone umbrella incorporate community engagement, sustainability, and authentic storytelling. Not just soulless steel towers, but vibrant complexes that people felt a connection to. This approach was radical compared to Darius's previous buy low, flip high ethos. But as early pilot programs succeeded, naysayers were silenced. And where was Darius in all of this? Holed up in his consultant role, occasionally emerging with half-baked suggestions for expansions that Mariana often dismissed or heavily modified. Each meeting between them felt like navigating a minefield of past wounds and unspoken regrets. Sometimes Mariana glimpsed a flicker of remorse in his eyes. Other times he clung to arrogance, as if still refusing to believe she had beaten him at the Empire game. Viewer engagement. Prompt. Feeling inspired by Mariana's leadership? Type leader if you think she's setting the perfect example for corporate change. As the months passed, White Sparkstone Holdings began to stabilize. The frantic exodus of talent halted, replaced by cautious optimism as new hires brought fresh energy. A handful of socially conscious investors took note of Mariana's approach, infusing additional capital to support expansions. Predictably, the media latched onto the compelling narrative. The so-called betrayed wife takes over her ex-husband's empire. Mariana stayed tight-lipped about her personal history in interviews, focusing instead on transparent business practices and community-centered growth. Nevertheless, the public devoured every rumor about her complicated relationship with Darius. Some gossiped that she was exacting sweet revenge, while others speculated she might be strong-armed by shady financiers. Mariana ignored the clamor, intent on working relentlessly to ensure the firm's transformation was genuine and lasting. She also found small windows of time to be with Noah, who toddled happily around their apartment, peppering her with questions about the giant buildings she worked in. In one afternoon, a knock on her office door revealed Darius, hair slightly disheveled, a file clutched in his hand. He hesitated in the doorway. "You got a minute?" he asked quietly. She nodded, offering him a seat. Clearing his throat, he began to outline a real estate lead in a neighboring city, an opportunity to acquire a distressed waterfront project at a fraction of its value. The old Darius might have pitched it with bravado, but now he seemed almost humble. "Why bring this to me?" she asked, eyebrows raised. He sighed, glancing at the photo of Noah on her desk. "Because I realize I might have overlooked the importance of a thoughtful approach. I rushed expansions before, and I paid the price. This time I'd like your input." Mariana studied him carefully. Remnants of the man she'd once loved flickered in his eyes, along with regret. She felt no urge to coddle him, but she could sense he was trying, in his own way, to make amends. "All right," she said, flipping through the pages. "Let's see what we can do together." It was a step toward a working rapport, far from forgiveness, but perhaps a sliver of redemption. For Mariana, forging a stable partnership with her former husband was beneficial for the company, and maybe, in some quiet corner of her heart, for Noah as well. Viewer engagement prompt. Type redeem if you think Darius deserves a second chance, or too late if you believe he's beyond saving. Under Mariana's leadership, the firm undertook a remarkable shift. Building managers reported higher tenant satisfaction. New developments emerged with a balanced focus on profitability and neighborhood enrichment, setting them apart in a crowded market. A year after the restructuring, White Sparkstone Holdings hosted a grand relaunch gala, an elegant but inclusive affair where investors mingled with local artists, nonprofit representatives, and media outlets. Mariana took to the stage in a tasteful navy gown, heart-pounding but voice steady, to articulate her vision, a real estate enterprise that stood for ethics, innovation, and communal thriving. The crowd erupted in applause, standing in ovation for the woman who had defied every harsh statistic stacked against her. In the front row, Darius, quietly dapper in a charcoal suit, clapped with a solemn expression. He seemed content for the first time to linger on the sidelines and let Mariana command the spotlight, recognizing perhaps that she was the force who breathed new life into his failing empire. Later that evening, as the gala wound down, Mariana found herself gazing out at the city lights from a wide balcony. She felt a gentle tug on her sleeve. Turning, she saw Noah, now 4, peeking up curiously. Darius had brought him over to watch the celebratory fireworks illuminating Havenport's night sky. The three stood there for a moment, an unlikely tableau of mother, father, and child at the helm of a resurrected empire. No words were exchanged, but the hush in that moment spoke volumes about roads once broken, now forging a tentative new path. This was the story no one had predicted. The woman cast aside in her most vulnerable hour, returning not just to survive, but to steer the ship once captained by her betrayer. Mariana White had proven that resilience and vision could topple even the highest walls of arrogance and greed. For the employees of White Sparkstone Holdings, for Noah's future, and perhaps even for Darius's overdue reckoning, her triumph was a powerful reminder. The best revenge is often found not in petty payback, but in forging something better, brighter, and more enduring than anyone believed possible. If this saga captivated you, feel free to like, share, and comment. Did Mariana's victory satisfy your sense of justice? Or are there still loose ends you wish she'd tie up? Together, let's keep the conversation going. Your insights fuel the next chapter of stories that celebrate resilience, redemption, and the limitless capacity of a determined heart. Final viewer engagement. Prompt: thank you for sticking with us on this epic journey. Comment inspired if Mariana's story lit a spark in you today. Remember, no setback is permanent if you keep believing in your own power to rise.